Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Profit Optimizing Inventory to Better Fulfill Customer Demand. Today's presenters will be Ed Renneman, CIO and VP of MIS for Crate and Barrel, and Jerry Necklebach, President and CEO of 4R Systems. My name is Ken Clark and I am Executive Editor of Chain Store Age magazine, which along with 4R Systems and Crate and Barrel is a co-sponsor of today's event. We're very happy to be a part of it because we believe the topic is one of those information technology challenges that keep retailers awake at night, finding the right balance between inventory cost and customer satisfaction. Crate and Barrel's case study and 4R solution will be explored in Chain Store Age's May issue of Retail Technology Quarterly, but there's more to the story, and here to tell that story are Ed Renneman and Jerry Necklebach. During their presentation, participants of our live event will have a chance to email questions that will be addressed in a Q&A session following the presentation. We encourage you to submit your question anytime during the event, which will last for about 1 hour. Now for the formal introductions. Ed Renneman is the CIO and VP of MIS of Crate and Barrel, a leading multi-channel housewares and furniture retailer with more than $1 billion in annual sales. Ed joined Crate and Barrel as CIO in October 1996. He works with senior management to solve corporate problems and develop MIS strategy, and he is actively involved in the design, development, and implementation of IT solutions. Jerry Necklebach is the President and CEO of 4R Systems, a technology company that specializes in helping retailers profit optimize their supply chain and inventory decisions. An MIT graduate with degrees in both physics and Earth and Planetary Sciences, Jerry was previously Chairman, President, and CEO of Interlink Software Corporation. And prior to that, he was Senior VP of Nielsen Solutionware, a technology business unit of AC Nielsen. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Ed.
Hi, and this is Jerry. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Chain Store Age, for sponsoring this webinar. I think we've got an hour of very interesting things that we would like to share with you. We've divided the presentation into three components. One is the context, and Ed and I will be throughout the presentation kind of going back and forth talking a little bit about the theory of what we do as well as what's happened here at Crate and Barrel. But in the context, we'll talk about retail supply chain efficiency. How do you look at it? How can you think about it? And then we'll also talk about Crate and Barrel's profile and challenge, which Ed will focus on. After that, we'll go on and talk about how we actually evaluated Crate and Barrel's supply chain, how we built a case, and how we did a pilot and rollout of what we decided to do first. And then we'll conclude with talking about where we're going with profit optimizing Crate and Barrel's inventory and supply chain. What we believe is that retailers are an awful lot like investors. And in fact, we buy stock, if you will, our inventory, just like the investment community buys stock in companies, retail companies many times. And when we look at the cycle, what we do is we take cash, we put it into product with the hope of getting return. And people are oftentimes focused on how fast that happens, what the turns are. But what's also important is how much money you make in each cycle. There are three major decisions that drive the profitability of this cycle. One is, how do you buy a product? If you buy too much at the beginning of life of a product, for example, you might have excess inventory. If you buy too little, you would end up having cost of lost sales. Putting the product in the right place is an important decision. And also, getting the most out of your extra goods at the end of a season is very important. And these three decisions are really what erode gross margin down to the net margin that many retailers experience. So the challenge in all of this is figuring out how much to invest in inventory without breaking the bank and also satisfying the customer. Bear with us here. We're waiting for a slide to change.
Okay.
We perpetually see retailers that go through an interesting sequence of events. One is that they'll have high in-stocks, and customers are happy, and the in-stocks are good, but the inventories become very costly. They turn slowly. And oftentimes, this is like the Turkish bazaar. The product's stacked to the ceiling. There's a lot of product alternatives, but it's very expensive to maintain. So oftentimes what ends up happening is that the retailer says, well, we need to go on a cost containment drive, and what we'll do is start to take inventory out. Maybe 18 months later, we end up with what I affectionately call the Soviet shopping experience, where, we have much less cost of inventory, but we're out of stock on an awful lot, and the customers aren't all that happy. And in fact, what happens in a lot of cases is retailers go through an oscillation that might take 12 months, 18 months, where they'll go through a series of cost reduction drives and then customer service drives. And it typically is one of the things that really occupies the retailer's thinking for their employees about a third of their time. It becomes one of the major initiatives. And the trick is to get it just right, that we need to find the profitable balance between too much inventory and too little inventory. And what we're really doing is balancing the cost of a lost sale versus the cost of excess inventory. And what's really important for this is understanding that uncertainty is really a driver of this kind of a cost. If you look at the last 50 years of inventory management, a lot of it's been focused on getting a perfect forecast. Because if we knew the answer, it'd be easy. We'd buy exactly the right amount of product, we'd put it exactly at the right place at the right time, and we'd have no excess inventory to liquidate. But in fact, we can't really get a perfect forecast. There's a lot of randomness out there in the world. Consumers just don't schedule their appointments by some kind of regular timetable to come to your store, but they decide, I'll come this week. The weather's good this week. I'll go out and play instead of go shop. There are a lot of things that drive a lot of variability in consumer demand.
And I think I might add this, although we're sort of talking about the background, the theory, but I think for us, this was one of the real eye-opening things that, because I think for years we were also in pursuit of that, get the perfect forecast. What is more important is knowing how much uncertainty there is and effectively dealing with that uncertainty.
And a good analogy would be if we went to a casino, we went to Las Vegas, and we decided that our betting strategy was going to be the perfect forecast. It would mean that we would sit down at the roulette wheel and we'd say, my model for betting here is I'm going to predict the number that's going to come up. And in fact, I think what we really think about is we know there are a number of numbers there that have a certain probability of coming up, and they have a certain payoff and an investment cost in order to get that payoff. And that's exactly what exists for a retailer, is that they're making bets on inventory, and they'd like to understand what is the probability of that bet coming in, how much does it cost me to make the bet, and ultimately how much do I get back when I win the bet, and is it enough to justify the investment? So what we do is we take optimization to link that uncertainty to economic outcomes. So we take a forecast, if you look at the bullseye at the top, but we say, it's really not the midpoint forecast. We might sell 12,522 units. Isn't just absolutely correct, that there's an uncertainty underneath that. So if we take that uncertainty and we look at the economic outcomes that are tied to that, we can understand what the trade-off is in our investment of inventory between lost sales and excess inventory. And what we found is that by applying this type of mathematics and these types of approaches to the inventory decision, that we can actually help retailers improve profitability by 200 plus basis points, or 2% or more of sales.
There it goes. Well, and that was sort of the theory, the background, and what we're going to do at this point is really talk about how we approached the problem here and the specific results. I'm going to assume that most people out there know Crate and Barrel, and really to say a few words about Crate. We were founded in 1962 by Gordon and Carol Siegel. We do have 150 plus stores coast to coast. We are over $1 billion in sales. But, I think beyond, and not that we're opposed to profit and the bottom line, but I think one of the most important things that you'll find that is ingrained at Crate, not only in the stores and the merchandising department, but right through IT, is that we feel like we have a higher purpose, that we're bringing good style, design, and taste to the marketplace. We want customers to, when they're thinking about furnishing their home, to have Crate and Barrel be top of mind. Another thing, and vendors often remark on this, is just the quality of the people. People at Crate and Barrel are very important. I guess really the last thing I would say is, I think the word is out there that yes, the IT department here is a little bit on the crazy side. We do tend to custom develop a lot. And yes, we are the crazy people that custom developed our own point of sale system and are in the process of rolling that out. But, I think what we have tried to do, we do look at software. We do evaluate it. We're very selective. And when we choose a product, it's got to fit in well. Really, I guess, what's the history? I think from an overall philosophy standpoint, we want to put information in the hands of the associates making the decision. We have never been about having the software or the systems tell us what to do. And, I see the second point here, this old, push versus pull. When Gordon Siegel, the CEO, and I have discussed giving seminars and stuff, we've always been a little worried about revealing a little bit too much in terms of what it is that we do. And so I will say we do both. We do push and pull, but at the store level for store replenishment, we are largely pull. And we do that in large part because, again, what we do is put information in the hands of the management of the store. We have a 20-year-old inventory management document that gives them weekly rates of sales, what's on hand at the warehouse, what's on hand at the store. They apply their knowledge of their customer, the marketplace, how they're going to merchandise the store, what displays they have to make purchasing decisions. Then, oops. We're just fumbling around a little bit here on the slides. Why change? I think, the most important thing is that we didn't think we had a major problem. We thought that the information that we were delivering, the process that we had, was really pretty good. And I think the work that we did with 4R in some initial benchmarking showed that it was good.
Yeah, actually, one of the things when we did, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but when we looked at their inventory and how it performed, it was actually one of the best performances that we'd seen to date. Nonetheless, I think we all saw opportunities for improvement and also a framework for understanding why those improvements made sense for the business.
At the same time, we thought we could do better. And I think we were also needing to address some issues. Certainly as the company was growing, store management's visibility to what all was going on in the company was becoming harder and harder for individual store managers to take into account. So what were the requirements for change? I'm going to say, the interesting thing is if we look at the first line, profitability and customer service, and we've highlighted the red. The really important word is and, because we wanted to accomplish both. And I think when we've looked at products in the past or even our own internal development, I think you have to be very careful as to what you optimize on. You could say, for example, given a level of inventory, maximize sales. Given a level of service, minimize inventory.
Right.
But we really wanted to do both.
And if I might add, actually, when you say given this, I want to do that, it really isn't then about an optimization. It's about weighting one and saying that takes precedence over the other. And it's this balancing act that's very hard to do.
And in terms of the optimization of both